So the message this morning is entitled, Jesus Would Wear a Mask. And it's maybe kind of one of those expected sermons, I don't know. But it has been important or on my mind the last couple of weeks as I've encountered more and more people not wearing a mask and the importance of wearing a mask. And so in the spirit of starting over and of celebrating being together this morning, I don't want to preach so much as I want to share with you. And it may be longer than you would like or longer than I planned, but we're going to work our way through it this morning as we consider what we've been experiencing as we go through COVID-19. My thoughts this morning are focused on the subject of masks that, as you know, continue to be a contentious issue in Canada and the United States today. In fact, all chief medical officers of health in North America, in our two countries, as well as around the world, including here in Atlantic Canada, have publicly proclaimed their belief that the continued rampant spread of the COVID-19 virus in this particular area is a result of people failing to distance and not wear protective masks. It's been proven. It's scientific. And in places where the virus is particularly practically non-existent, like in our Atlantic Canadian bubble, it is because people are distancing and wearing masks as they get on with their lives. And so it leads me to make an assumption, and making assumptions are not always a good idea, but the assumption is that if more and more people would wear masks and sanitize their hands and socially distance, then the virus would be even less of a threat to us. Part of what I'm going to share with you this morning concerns the many different types of masks we wear and the reasons we wear it. And part of what I share this morning concerns a spiritual approach to mask wearing. But all of what I share with you is factual. It's true. And it's meant to make you think about why you wear a mask or why you don't wear a mask. And how we should respond to those around us who do not wear masks. It's a contentious issue. It's a hard thing to navigate these times in which we're in. Elizabeth read a passage familiar to all of you, and you might think, what does that have to do with masks and COVID-19? Well, nothing, really. But it does talk to the spiritual issue of masks that we all wear from time to time. Adam and Eve disobeyed God. And because they disobeyed God, they experienced guilt and shame in light of their decisions to eat from the tree of good and evil. They were vulnerable and they were exposed in that moment. And their automatic response was to sew fig leaves together, making coverings for themselves, and they hid. So we're talking about masks of sorts. We can learn from their experiences as we reflect on our lives. So we want to reflect on our own lives as we think about masks. We can easily fall into this pattern where we make decisions that lead to guilt and shame, or ridicule, or criticism from other people. And our automatic response can be to make coverings for our lives and to hide behind them. Now, we don't find fig leaves today and make coverings for our bodies, but we creatively come up with all kinds of other masks that we can wear to hide various things. We put on a face for the world to see. This external face oftentimes does not match what or who we are on the inside. Putting on some form of a mask is a natural response to shame and feeling vulnerable. Nobody likes to experience pain. And we all do whatever it takes to avoid feeling pain. And most people do whatever it takes to avoid causing pain to others. A covering or a mask is one way to try and to hide from pain. We may be able to avoid pain and feeling vulnerable to that pain by putting on a mask. This mask may work for us in the short term, but in the long term, it robs us. It robs us of genuine relationships with God and with other people. We may grow so accustomed to our masks that it becomes how we see and understand ourselves, and nothing could be further from the truth. Our definition or description of our identity is how we see and understand ourselves. If we connect that description of identity to the coverings or the masks that we wear, then we begin to see how our masks become our identity, and it isn't real. We can become so comfortable with that masked identity that we actually lose ourselves in the process. And concerning those masks that we wear for reasons other than health issues, we need to remember that God offers us his unconditional love. He doesn't require us to clean ourselves up before we come to him. He just wants us to come to him. He doesn't want our masks, he wants us. If we learn how to trust him with this, then we can take off our masks and we can learn how to genuinely relate to him. And when we learn how to relate to God, we're able to learn how to relate to others. And in learning how to relate to other people, we are then able to realize that we don't have to wear masks at all to be acceptable. I understand the need to wear a mask, to wear a protective mask today. I do. Do I like wearing a mask? No, I don't, to be truthful. But I wear one just the same, and I'm anxiously waiting for the day, as I'm sure you are, when we can take the masks off for good. Start shaking hands again and hugging people for those so inclined. And I would like to think that the masks and this restrictive living isn't here to stay. But honestly, who really knows the answer to that question? If you are undecided about whether or not to wear a mask these days, here's another piece of data to consider. Jesus would wear a mask. If you're not a Christian, then I understand that this might be irrelevant information. But for those of us who claim to be followers of Christ and are still on the fence about wearing a mask, it ought to be the deciding factor. As representatives of Jesus, you and I, should wear masks when we're out and about with other people. I'm confident that Jesus would wear a face mask if he were here today, because I know he wouldn't be swayed by any of the reasons I hear people giving for not wearing one. Yes, they are uncomfortable. They're inconvenient. Yes, they make us look foolish. But the whole revelation of the incarnation is that word that Christianity uses for talking about Jesus being God in the flesh and living amongst us on earth, is that it was inconvenient and it was uncomfortable for Jesus, but he did it just the same. Did we just lose the mic? It was inconvenient and it was uncomfortable for Jesus. It was God's way of going out of his way, leaving the splendor and the glory of heaven to live uncomfortably on earth, covering up his divinity with frail and imperfect human flesh. So inconvenience and discomfort weren't a deterrent for Jesus. And clearly, looking foolish wasn't either. And Jesus endured the considerably worse than uncomfortable death on the cross in order to break the power of sin and death and to reconcile God and humanity. He didn't shy away from that. But instead of seeing the glory of that gift, humans have always dismissed it as weak and shameful. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 12 that the message of the cross has always been foolishness. Jesus didn't care if he looked a fool as he went about the process of saving everyone's lives. And Christians shouldn't either. But many people who refuse to wear a mask do so because they simply don't believe that masks are necessary or helpful. Again, if you aren't a follower of Jesus, believing it is a waste of time, probably will stop you from masking up. But if you are a Christian, you should be wearing a mask when you're out in public. Even if you happen to think that they're useless and inconvenient and an infringement on my rights, you should, as a Christian, be wearing a mask. I could quote you lots of scriptures to back this up. Scriptures commanding those who are strong to take care of those who are weak, like we find in Romans chapter 15 and verse 1. Or scriptures teaching believers to voluntarily limit our freedoms for the sake of others, as we find in Romans chapter 14 and verse 13. The scriptures about obeying local authorities, like we find in Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 7. And scriptures about becoming all things to all people by all means, like we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And scriptures about conforming to local customs in order to share salvation, as we see in 1 Peter chapter 2. But all of this boils down to this one thing. It doesn't matter what you believe about wearing masks. It matters what those around you believe about wearing masks. And that's the point that the continued spread of this virus hinges on. The wearing of masks, the disinfecting of our hands, and social distancing. It matters, so let me read it again. It doesn't matter what you believe about wearing masks. It matters what those around you believe about wearing masks. Because we aren't being asked to wear masks to protect ourselves. And many people don't understand this. We don't wear a mask to protect, I don't wear a mask to protect me. We are asked to wear masks to protect others. And that goes back to the scripture that I shared with you a few moments ago. I wear a mask so that I might be protecting the people I come into contact with. I'm not wearing a mask necessarily to protect me. You wearing a mask, that protects me. So when people see you not wearing a mask, those who agree with you might think you are smart and free and independent. You can make your own choices. You can disregard what the public health authorities tell you and what the government tells you. But if you want to shop at Walmart, you need a mask on to get in the door. And people aren't going to give up shopping at Walmart, I guarantee you that. And so they wear their masks. And there are other stores too. And if you want to come to church, you have to have a mask on. People say, well, you can't keep me out of a church. Yeah, we can. In this environment of pandemic, if you don't want to wear a mask, you can't come in. And it's not because we don't want you here. It's because we want the people who are here to be safe and to feel that they can come and worship and not have fear of this virus and of this pandemic. But those who believe the reasons government and health and scientific experts give us for wearing masks, those people look at you and they think, that person, they don't care if I die. Now, I know that might be dramatic, but that's in essence what it is. And I took notice on Friday night. Gilda and I went to Costco. And Costco in the States have mandated masks. They haven't in Canada yet, although they strongly suggest it. And I couldn't believe how many people were not wearing masks. And maybe it was just me, but I thought that those not wearing masks were looking at me wearing them. And I'm thinking how crazy this is. Here's the bottom line for Christians. Even if you believe the fear surrounding COVID-19 is not justified, that fear is still real. Even though you believe that God will protect you, and He has, and He will continue to, the fear of COVID-19 is real. Jesus didn't insult or belittle people who were afraid. He went out of His way to come alongside of them. Jesus went out of His way to show in His flesh that their lives mattered to Him. He fed people even though they get hungry again. He healed people even though they would get sick again. And if you read the scriptures, you will know that He raised people from the dead even though He knew they would die again. He didn't call them names. He didn't lecture them about risks and responsibility. He cared for them in practical ways that showed He loved them. He didn't mock those who were afraid. He relieved their fears. And as Christians, we can relieve the fears of everybody we meet if we have a mask on our faces. They're not convenient. They are uncomfortable. I don't like them, but I know why they're important. And so I wear them. And I like to think that it puts other people at ease because I have one on. And so our responsibility as Christians is to wear a mask. Because if Jesus was here today, He would wear a mask. I came across this poem written by Laura Kelly Funacci, who writes a monthly web column called Faith at Home. This poem caught my attention because not once does it mention the words virus or pandemic. And yet when you read it, you will immediately know what the words, when this is over, means. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, a school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be. We were called to be. We hoped to be. And may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. I was going to copy that and give it to you. I didn't do that. I guess I'm not supposed to. But maybe I'll send it out to you by internet. So let me ask you, what kind of mask do you see people wearing around you? Indeed, what kind of mask are you wearing around people? I'm talking spiritually, and I'm also talking practically. And let me encourage you with the words we find in John chapter 14 and verse 27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, give I unto you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Friends, there is only one kind of mask that we should be wearing right now. The one that protects the health of others because of the pandemic we live with. In every other area of life, put away the masks that separate and disguise and put on the glory of God. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 31 is clear. Whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Grumbling and complaining about having to wear a mask if you're going into a store or going to church or wherever it is isn't going to accomplish anything but paint you as a Christian that does nothing but grumble and complain and wants to go against advice of the authorities. Earlier this week, it was a kind of a miserable day, and I got out of my car and I walked someplace and I got to the door and I seen the sign for a mask and I reached in my pocket and I realized it was back in the car. Back to the car I went, and I got it, and back to the building, and I went in. Whatever you do, do it all as for the glory of God. And that certainly includes doing your part in conquering this pandemic. And whatever insecurities we might have in life about this or that or the other thing, entrust it to God through faith in Jesus, and you won't need any masks to hide behind. Friends, Jesus is greater than any problem we could ever have. But I do believe that we cannot solve this pandemic, that he cannot solve this pandemic unless people are willing to do their part. And it's really quite simple. We could be confined to our homes. We could have our groceries delivered to our doors. We could be working from home and not having any contact with friends or family or neighbors. Or we can sanitize our hands, wear a mask, social distance, and get on with life in a reasonable fashion. Jesus, if he was here right now, would wear a mask. He would not be on a soapbox on a street corner telling people to just believe in me and it'll be all right. He would be wearing a mask. And if we set the example as Christians, abiding by the rules of the local authorities to wear our masks and to distance and to sanitize, then we will lead the way to this virus disappearing once and for all. I believe that. So wear a mask. No one had a problem with it this morning. And I don't think very many people took a mask from the boxes because most of you arrived with a mask. But there will be a mask here every week and there will be sanitizer here every week. Let us get used to these simple rules, as inconvenient as they might be. And we'll be able to continue to worship. And we'll be able to continue to experience God's blessings in our lives. And we will be doing our part as Christians to set an example of being caring and concerned about our fellow man. Jesus would wear a mask. And I think he probably wouldn't like it either. But he would do it. Let's pray. Lord, we live in strange times, confusing times. Depending on what newspaper or television station you watch the news on, you hear different stories. But we live in certain times as well. That you promise to hold us in the palms of your hand. That you are already in tomorrow, waiting for us to catch up. That you will take care of us and you will bless us. But Lord, you want us to be smart enough to do our part, to wear a mask, to help rid the world of this virus, to show our concern for other people. And if we could only do that more and more every day, then you would be able to continue to work a miracle in this world. Lord, thank you for today, for each one here, and in the weeks to come. Lord, continue to bring people back to our fellowship. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.